Good morning, everybody. It's Jeff Goldberg for the Sales Pro Network. If you haven't joined us before, I'm a sales coach and trainer. I work with both individuals and organizations internationally to help them do one thing and one thing only: increase their sales. And I founded the Sales Pro Network about 5 years ago to elevate the profession of sales, to give salespeople a place where they can hang out and network on. It's a Facebook group. And if you've joined us before, you know that every Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern, I either do a live training or an interview with somebody who can add value to the profession of sales. And boy, oh boy, I'm excited about today's guest because he's an expert on cold calling. And boy, I can't tell you how many times I'm asked, Jeff, does cold calling still work? Did cold calling work when the dinosaurs were around? Will cold calling work when black holes swallow our sun? So I'm really excited to talk to our guest today, Nick Jeins. Good morning, Nick.
Good morning, Jeff.
I'm not lying when I say I'm excited to talk to you. Before I get into the 1,000,001 questions I have for you, I just do want to say to anybody who's listening, I posted this on LinkedIn this week. There's a lot going on for those of you who are listening in America, and I would guess anywhere in the world. There's a lot going on here in politics, finance, economy. A lot's going on. Well, no matter what side of the political aisle you're on, I don't care. But here's the thing: pay attention to none of it. Because at the end of the day, it's not going to help you sell more. It's not going to help you get more appointments. It's not going to help you close more business. And what we need to do is focus on what's important, taking care of ourselves, our families, and the businesses that we work for, whether they're our own or somebody else's. So my coaching for today is tune all that crap out. Pay attention because we've got to be aware of what's going on, but don't let that affect what you're doing. And with that, Nick, can you please tell us a little bit about your journey? How'd you become a cold call expert?
Well, I suppose I've been doing this now on and off for about 35, 38 years, something like that. I started my life as a car salesperson, and that was, I suppose, a difficult intro. I was just about 19, 20 years old. Part of that process was to try and get people into the dealership through using phone calls, cold calls, but I was absolutely awful at it. Fast forward about 18 months, 2 years, I moved out of that and into a company when I first moved to London, because that's where it was all at, all the action. And I thought I want to get into the sales industry properly. And I came across a telemarketing firm. Telemarketing, I think, is a term that we don't use or hear very much nowadays. But it gave me a very quick insight into speaking to people on the phone and trying to sell them to some sort of a subscription or a sign up. At first, it was all B2C. So I was calling people sort of whilst they're eating their tea at their homes about 8 o'clock in the evening. But I found a sort of a natural tendency to get good results. And I was then very quickly moved to the B2B side. So I was doing 9 to 5 hours as opposed to working in the evenings. But the great thing about it, and I think this is where I cut my teeth on it, was that a number of the campaigns were all different, and every 2 or 3 weeks we would change the campaigns. It was all B2B, all cold calling, and I was speaking then to business owners or booking appointments for our clients' reps, that sort of thing. So I think probably within 2 years I got really experienced, and it became a very natural environment for me to work in, and it just continued really from there, Jeff. So there's been quite a few. All of the employed positions I've had since that point, I work for myself now, have done for quite some time. But at that time in my youth, it gave me the insight and the ability to be able to cold call naturally, confidently. And of course, I was just honing my skill and getting better and better at it.
Got it. And I have to tell you that whenever I speak to somebody from London, the first thing I always think about is, oh boy, their weather's worse than ours. But you're not having bad weather, are you? And why is that?
No, I'm quite fortunate. Well, I'm not. I've manufactured a lifestyle for myself that allows me to live and work where I feel. And at the moment in time, I'm in the Caribbean. I'm in the Dominican Republic. So I'm quite happy to say that I'm wearing a T-shirt, and that's plenty enough for me at the moment.
So I just went from being obnoxious about how much better my weather is than yours to being jealous, but that's okay.
Hey ho.
I might have to hop on a plane and come visit you. We can talk more about this.
You're very welcome to do that.
What are some of the biggest misconceptions people have about cold calling?
I think a lot of the noise that I see, certainly on places like LinkedIn at the moment, are those that don't do it very often. Those that are not very good at doing it are saying that cold calling doesn't work. It's It's an old traditional sort of way of speaking to people or trying to conduct business, and it just isn't effective. And they really couldn't be further from the truth. I think throughout my career, what I've noticed is this real consistency within the selling industry that cold calling has always worked. But the fact is that it's tempered with a lot of people that aren't good at it, don't like doing it. As a result of those two things, they don't bother. But if you are practiced, if you keep honing your ability and your skill, then you will get better at cold calling. So I'll always ask the people that say that cold calling they think is dead. I'll always ask them why they think that, and I'll happily have a conversational discussion with them. But strangely enough, Jeff, a lot of them don't like to have that conversation because they realize that I might be speaking the truth.
You used a term that I find interesting. Most people don't like cold calling. Do you like cold calling? Because I usually say, if you like cold calling, you're either lying or you're crazy.
I'm smiling because I think I'm the latter. I'm a little bit crazy. It's something that's ingrained in me. So I don't really kind of feel that should I or shouldn't I not like it. It's just a natural element of my selling sort of life. It's been with me for so long that it is a natural part of me. And I have to say that generally, yes, I do enjoy it. And the reasons being are many, but one of them, straight off the top of my head, is that if you have a really good, engaging conversation with a business leader, it's such a thrilling thing to be able to do. You're speaking to somebody that hasn't ever spoken to you. You're a complete stranger, effectively, but because you're engaging at their level, talking about their business world and involving them and are genuinely interested in their life, it's such an engaging conversation. How can that not be an enjoyable sort of thing to do? So I do enjoy it. There are people, of course, it can be difficult, and keeping up the motivation, especially the positive mindset, that can be a very tricky thing to do. But I've dialed that out, pardon the pun, many years ago, because my approach to it is very robotic. I just make another call, make another call, make another call. But of course, the conversations I have aren't robotic. They're as engaging as I can make them. But not everybody wants to take that, and that's fine. But it's a very quick way to find out if somebody is going to be interested, engaged. If you do have something that is likely to assist them, support them in their business world, you can find that out really very quickly. Emails, cold emails, marketing. People just don't respond if they're not interested, or just don't respond. But if we ask them, if we have a conversation like you and I are doing now, we can find out quite quickly.
I still say that cold calling is the most time effective, cost effective, and time efficient way to fill up your calendar with appointments if you don't have enough, and if you know how to do it well and you do it consistently, which I find is something that is a challenge for most salespeople. If they actually do have the, let's say, chutzpah or the temerity to attempt cold calling, even if they have some success, they're typically inconsistent. Okay, I've got a few appointments now, I don't have to cold call anymore. Or you'll find somebody who's very, very busy and they don't prospect at all. And then when they're out of business, they have nothing else to do. Oh, you know what? Maybe I better pick up the phone and cold call. And now the pressure's really on. So you're getting to be pushy. And that's certainly not the way to make a cold call. Am I correct?
I think so. I think a lot of, especially business leaders, I mean, if you set up a business, it doesn't matter what you're doing. Who is responsible for getting your name out there and into the marketplace? And how can you do that as cost efficiently as possible? Well, it's picking up the phone. How much does that cost? It hardly costs a thing. But if you're going to have a look at a marketing budget, you're going to build a website, you're going to do all of these things, they cost a lot of money generally. And how do you know they're going to be effective? How do you know somebody that's read that has gone, that's really interesting? You sit by the telephone or the computer, you put the kettle on and you wait for inbound leads. And for a lot of people, you'll be just waiting forever because nothing's going to happen. So you can either be reactive or proactive. And probably the most proactive way you can be when trying to speak to somebody about what you do and why it might help them is to pick up the phone.
Yeah.
But again, I think this could be a generational thing, Jeff. I think people like you and I of a certain ilk and certain age, I think we grew up with it. It was something that we didn't have the choice about doing. If you want to get yourself out into the marketplace, pick up the phone. We didn't really have emails in those days. We do now. We have a lot of different tech that allows us to do something that's easier, that's less, we perceive, invasive, where we don't have to sort of second guess. We can just send an email, nobody's hurt, everybody's fine. But how effective is that? Okay, there's lots of people who've tried to make it very effective, but I don't do that. I cold call. And the reason I do it is because it was very effective 35 years ago, and it still is today.
Yeah, and almost everything else does take more time. I like that you can pick up the phone and have no appointments today, but have plenty of appointments tomorrow. Look, there's nothing better than a referral. And after that, I love inbound call. I like people who raise their hand. But if you don't have enough of that going on while you're developing that, whether you're using LinkedIn or email or networking, I get a third of my business from networking, but that doesn't happen overnight. That's because I've been in a group for 20 years and I've established relationships. But you can pick up the phone and literally have an appointment in an hour.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. And I think that's the difference, is that, as you said, it's nice to have those inbound leads. It's nice to have those referrals, those connections. But that takes time to establish. So some of the businesses that I've owned and ran over the last 3 decades, I've done exactly that. I've started with next to nothing, picked up the phone, and I've just started to make things happen. After a while, then it starts to come back, and I wouldn't say relax, but that's the word I would perhaps use best to describe what you can do. You can sort of like come down a little bit because things are starting to move forward progressively without that input. You don't need to do it, but it's an essential thing that you should always have to do when you're starting a business.
Yeah. That's how I built my business. Look, the regular listeners to this broadcast know that, I worked for another sales training company before I opened up my own 20 years ago. I had nothing to do because I wasn't going to take their clients when I left. I sat on the phone all day for weeks and weeks and weeks. And while I was doing that, I was also using email marketing and working on LinkedIn. And I got to the point eventually where I no longer need to cold call. I don't love it like you do, or I don't even like it like you do. But I do it once a month now, just for about a couple of hours, just to make sure that when I'm teaching other people how to do it, that what I'm teaching them is still working. But personally, I'd rather live in my car than ever have to depend on it. But it is how I built my business.
Fair enough.
This is the advice I give to all salespeople. Until you've got a full calendar of appointments, you need to cold call on a daily basis while you're building up all these other things. If not, feel free to starve. And to me, that's not an option. To me, it's really like, and again, if you love it and I hate it, it's okay. But to me, it's like going to the gym. Very few people really like going to the gym. It's hard work and it often hurts. There's a price to pay for everything. And to me, it's, if you're not willing to pay the price, you shouldn't be in sales at all. So if you don't have enough appointments, pay the price. So given all that, why don't salespeople cold call? Or why don't more salespeople cold call?
I think that it's generally imbued in them that they understand that there are easier options. So I think this difficulty aspect is a huge stop sign for them. We don't need to cold call because there are other options that might bring us similar results. And because we're talking to people on the phone on a cold call, nobody likes really to be rejected. Nobody wants to have their phone hung up on them, but it's part and parcel of what happens. But I think they feel that it's just a bit too hard. I don't want to be hurt. I don't want to be rejected constantly. I want to be able to sort of grow a business successfully or be successful in sales without sort of being abused, perhaps. I don't know what the word might be, but I think that's the reason they find it's a difficult option. The choices, there are so many more now, that are a lot easier than cold calling. So why not take the easiest choice?
It's actually not that it's difficult. It is easy. It's just, I think you used the perfect word, rejection. In fact, the point you just made was perfect. So years back, this is at least a decade ago, maybe even longer, an associate of mine, who we worked at different companies, needed a male trainer. She's a female trainer, and she had can I say the name of the company? Yeah. She had an agreement with Verizon Wireless to go to various offices all across the Northeast and do cold calling training. And for some reason, they wanted a male with her. I don't know why, but she chose me. that's actually besides the point. But the woman who was in charge of the entire Northeast, very important woman, big job, she would introduce us before every session, before we started our training. And she told the same story every time about how that fear of rejection is all really in your mind. You're going to get rejected, but here's the way she would introduce it. Do you really think that you're going to cold call somebody? They're going to yell at you or swear at you or something like that, or anything else. And then at lunch, you're going to go out to pick up a sandwich. But before that, you stop at a gas station. And as you're pumping gas, somebody pulls up on the other side of the pumps and you say, hey, how you doing today? And they go, hey, I know your voice. You're that idiot who cold called me this morning. You suck, which obviously doesn't happen. And everybody laughed just like you did. And they realized, you know what? What's the worst that happens? Maybe somebody does yell at you or say something nasty or hang up. But what about the fact that there are some people who will pick up the phone, listen to you politely, and then say no? But some will also go, okay, let's have a meeting or let's have a conversation. I often cringe at the cliche sales is a numbers game, but to a certain extent, it actually is. It's really a skills game and a metrics game. But if you make enough calls and you do it with skill, you will get appointments. Yes?
True. Now, you used an analogy earlier, didn't you, about going to the gym? And the thing about going to the gym is that we realize that we want to make a change. We want to affect proactively a change. So we choose to go to the gym. Now, if you're working, obviously that means perhaps that you're going to go after work or before. Let's say you go before. That means you might get up 5 a.m., maybe earlier, and you'll go to the gym. And in your country, unfortunately, when it's very cold in the winter, why would you want to do that? Going to the gym is really difficult. And you think, well, after the first couple of days, I can't see any tangible results here. There's nothing I can see that's made me feel that I've done something that's a really good choice. But if you say in your mind, all I need to do is to keep repeating this process, and in 3 months' time, when I actually look back, you might not see a great change. But all of those people that know you really well will go, wow, Jeff, what a change. What have you been doing? And that's how it works. Cold calling is no different. You're right to a degree. It can be construed as a numbers game. But if you sort of go, oh, somebody was awful to me, they hung up on me, they didn't want to listen to me, they didn't want to save money, they must be crazy, they're not listening. If we take all of that and put it in a box before we start calling, all of our emotions, our egos, etc., and we just get on the phone and we make a call and try to have an engaging conversation. Correct. Some people might be rude. Some people might be respectful and say no. But some people might say, actually, thanks, Nick, for calling right now. That's a really great time. And what you've got is something I wasn't aware was available, but now I am. Let's talk about it further. Yeah. And if you then look at your business in 3 months' time to see the changes that you've affected as a result of making these cold calls, it could be huge. And that, I think, is the difference. I am. If you sit at your desk and all you do is send out thousands and thousands of emails, cold emails, what's the chances that you're going to get some kind of immediate response? Well, of course, it's limited. It's almost nil. But with a call, if I speak to somebody, they can say, thanks for the call, Nick, but not right now. Maybe it's something in 6 months' time, actually, we could really use some knowledge about. So let's talk about it then. And that's the kind of thing that you get on a call that you can't get through any other medium, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that what you're saying is we're making our own luck, because there are,
yes, yeah.
I believe there are people right now sitting at their desks that need what you have to offer, what I have to offer, and what every other salesperson has to offer. Our job is, how do we find them? And the quickest way is picking up the phone. And I can't tell you, Nick, how often I just tell salespeople, will you just please effing pick up the phone? You know, I want to use the word hide, but that's not really it. We kind of, I'm just going to say that anyways. We hide behind emails and texts and everything else.
Totally hide.
I see sales managers who do it and salespeople who do it. And I'm a huge fan of technology, and anything that makes me more effective, more efficient is great. But sometimes you just got to go old school. There's
Absolutely.
Nothing that replaces a face-to-face meeting. Second best is a video conference, and after that is the phone. It just makes a difference. We're in the connection business. Salespeople are in the business of making connections. It's much harder to do via an email or a LinkedIn outreach or anything like that, because first of all, are they going to read it? maybe. I get 250 to 400 emails every single day. Cannot possibly read them all. I just don't have the time. If I recognize it, if Nick Jeins sends me an email, I'm going to read it because I know your name. Other than that, you better have an incredible subject line. Otherwise, I'm deleting it before I even open it. But if you happen to get me to pick up the phone, which admittedly is not as easy as it used to be, way more people used to pick up the phone, but you can still get through to people and you make that connection. And sometimes you know what? I'm so glad you called. They might have been thinking about, in your case, cold calling training for 6 months, and they just haven't had the time to focus on, I need to find somebody who can help me do this. And even though they've been thinking about it for 6 months or a year or 2 months or whatever it is, that well-timed call is the impetus they need to go, oh, I'm so glad you called. Now is the right time.
Yeah, you mentioned that you get hundreds of emails on a daily, weekly basis.
Every day.
Now, times that by, well, I don't know how many millions of business people out there in the world, but they all get the same thing too, Jeff. So how do you stand out when you're sending a cold email with all of that noise? How do you stand out? Well, clearly there's lots of people who are trying to tell you how you can do that. But if I were to pick up the phone and call you whilst you're filtering through all these hundreds of emails and you go like, hello, and I go, Jeff, we haven't actually spoken before. This is construed as a cold call, I suppose. But if you allow me 30 seconds, I'll tell you exactly the reason I wanted to speak to you specifically, because it might be relevant. And you go, okay. And all of a sudden, I've taken you away from all of that noise of the emails. We're now going to have a conversation. You might say, do you know, I didn't even know that was there.
Yep. Absolutely.
And how quick is that? And that's the difference. You cut through all the noise with a cold call generally. Now, true, there are some awful cold callers out there that have this terrible sort of tendency to hound some prospects. But again, if you practice, if you do things, if you put your prospect first, you can rise above that noise in cold calling too. And I know that even AI is now starting to sort of make its presence felt within cold calling. But this is still a very human thing to do. And if we remember back maybe 4 or 5 years to this little incident that happened in the world called COVID, people could not go into work. So what they had to do was to perhaps use their telephones far more frequently. Cold calling had a massive resurgence, huge boom. Everybody sort of said, well, this is the way to go forward again. As COVID sort of became a lot less and we all migrated back to the office, things started to change. So it's now easier, of course, again, to send emails as opposed to pick up the phone. But it was proven 5 years ago to be an incredibly effective tool. So it was proven 35 years ago to be an incredibly effective tool, and still today. But people have choices where they take the easier choice because they still perceive cold calling to be really difficult and quite terrifying, actually.
Yeah, I can't open every email, but I do open every piece of direct mail that comes into my office, and I answer every call. If I'm not, look, I disconnect my phone while I'm doing this. So if somebody's calling me now, I can't answer the phone. Sure. If I'm on with a client, I can't. But other than that, if I'm not busy with something else, actually interacting with another human, doesn't matter what else I'm doing, I'm going to answer the phone, because my philosophy is you never know. You know, it could be a prospect calling me. It could be somebody calling me, calling me who wants to cold call me for something else too. But I actually, me personally, I love those calls. Because I'm always fascinated to listen to what they have to say. And in my business, maybe you do this too, but I've often, well, I take it back, not often. I have sometimes been able to turn it into business, because I'll listen to somebody and go, wow, you're really good at this. Would you mind giving me your manager's name and number? I'd like to call them and compliment them on how great a job you did. And then I call them and I go, hey, I just spoke to your representative, Nick. I'm actually a sales coach. Would you be interested in some feedback? And I've actually turned that into business. So I'll pick up the phone every single time. The other thing I want to point out is what you said when you just gave us the example of your cold call is exactly what I teach also. I don't know what you call it. I call it permission-based marketing. Just 30 seconds, and I'll explain why I'm calling. The way I'll say it is, And at the end of that 30 seconds, I'm going to ask you if you'd like to continue the conversation. And Nick, if you say no, I'm going to thank you for your time and hang up, and I'll never call you again. Just 30 seconds, Nick. Is that fair enough? And most humans will give you 30 seconds. I don't have 10 minutes to give you right now, but if you ask me for 30 seconds, I'll give anyone 30 seconds. So I love that.
You're a business owner, aren't you? And it's a respectful thing to ask, do you mind if you just give me that time? Because what I have to say might actually be relevant to you. If it's not, we walk away, we part friends, fine. But at that point, you might think, actually, this is relevant, whether it's right now or whether it's in the future. But because I've had that respect for you to ask if you like your permission to, is it okay to take 30 seconds? And you said yes. Then we've gone into a conversation. Now, 9.5, 9.8 times out of 10, that conversation will carry on naturally without asking for any further time. Because now the person that you've called, the prospect, is engaged thinking, that's interesting. That they're starting to talk about their business world, which of course they are always incredibly interested in. And if somebody is genuinely interested, they're going to talk about it. And then we find out if there's likely to be some reason to progress this conversation or we don't. And if we don't, that's fine. Thanks for your time. It might be something in 6 months we revisit. Or let's carry on at a convenient time so we can sort of tell you a bit more about something perhaps that might be able to show a difference in your business world.
Yeah, I'd love to get your opinion on this, because my purpose of a cold call is simply to set an appointment. I'm looking to set an appointment so we can have a proper sales meeting. Do you engage with people? So here's how I'll do it. If somebody says, well, I've got a few minutes right now, great, I'm ready to talk. But I think it's respectful the way we're empowering the prospect in a way they're already empowered. They can hang up on us, they can swear at us, or they can say, sure, 30 seconds, you got that. And then if they, at the end of those 30 seconds, when I say, should we continue the conversation? If they say yes, we're good to go. So are you just trying to set an appointment, or are you actually just trying to have conversations, the sales conversation?
So it's very much it's the latter for me. So I don't look to set the appointment. And there's a number of reasons for that, which I can go into. But what I do is I want to have a conversation with a business leader that is likely to be engaging for them. Because what I have to say is something that actually now feels perhaps of interest, but they're not understanding exactly why it might be of interest. So what we will do is to have that conversation. And if I, through, I suppose, practice questioning and responsive listening, if I understand precisely what they're saying through that information that I get from them, I will then be able to tell if it's something that is likely to be of interest to them, at which point I'll say, Jeff, is it okay if we perhaps have a further conversation? You can then find out more about this, and then you'll be able to determine whether it's going to fit or it's not going to fit. So I suppose at the end of the day, it's almost a similar outcome, but I don't go there with the mindset of set that appointment. I go there with, let's have an engaging conversation first. Let's see if it is likely to be something of interest or assistance. And then at that point, we do what's probably the best thing to do for both of us.
Yeah. And as we were talking about before we came on the air, we've both had a situation where we've called people and they've said, hey, can you teach my team to do that?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Because so few people do it these days. How do you handle the truly constant rejection that we get when we're making calls? Because look, more people are going to say no than yes. And there are some rude people out there. I'm always interested in how sellers and cold callers put up with that. So how do you deal with the constant rejection?
Okay, well, there's a couple of answers to this. The first answer is that I know to expect it. It's going to happen, irrespective of what I feel and how good I think I might be. It's going to happen for many, many reasons. So if I'm speaking to a particular ICP within a certain industry, let's say, what I'll do is try to second guess what they might actually come back with first. And they might say, we've already got a provider. They might say, I've already got a contract. So I'll say, Jeff, we haven't spoken. This is a sales call. Let me have 30 seconds. You're going to tell me that you've already got a contract with a provider. You've got a great relationship with them. I know that. And then they're going to think, okay, this guy obviously understands that that's what we have. I understand that, but what I'd like to speak about, and then go into something different, perhaps that they weren't expecting. So I try to mitigate as best as I can first, up front, any kind of rejection I might get.
Yeah.
With that, what I then try to do is to understand what is really going to be really relevant for you been that ICP, so I can speak to you about something that is an issue that you've either probably had in the past, you've got right now, is likely to take place in the future. And if you are a savvy businessman, which I know that you're going to be, you're going to say, he's got me. But this is true. This happens in our industry. I might not be the right provider for you, but it's the right topic of engagement to speak about in our business.
Yeah.
So I try to understand that before I make the call.
Yeah.
To try and mitigate right at the start of it any kind of rejection.
Yeah. And I love what you said about anticipating what they might say. I believe there are really only 7 things that people say when they won't give you the appointment. And that when I do teach cold calling, which is only one of the things I do, where it's everything that you do, I love watching the light bulb go off over salespeople's heads, because they think, how do I handle the 8,000 different things that people say to me? There's really only a few. And one of them is, we've got a contract. We've got another provider. I'm not interested. Send me some information, and a couple of others. I'm busy. I love that one. And for me, it's, you're under contract. We're not talking about contracts. We're nowhere near discussing contracts. Why don't we just have a conversation and see if you like what I have to offer? That way, when your contract is up, you might think of us. To me, it's always about giving them an easy way to continue the conversation instead of fighting with them, which is what most salespeople do. I'm not here to argue with anybody.
And I think in terms, you've just hit the nail on the head there. I think a lot of prospects who do take calls, who are open to taking cold calls, they get so many bad ones that are pushy, sleazy snake oil salespeople that are trying to push something, ram it down their throat, that they put barriers up immediately. So they might not be telling us the absolute truth, but all they're trying to do is, oh, I recognize this, get them off the phone so I can continue with my day. Until somebody respectfully says, I know that that's happened to you. You probably get lots of awful calls. This might be slightly different. Give me 30 seconds. I'll tell you what it is. And you might say at the end of it, actually, Nick, I'm not interested. It's not for us. And I'll walk away, and that's fine. And he's thinking, she's thinking, people don't ask me that. They don't care they're just trying to ram something down my throat. And that's a massively important part of successful cold calling today, certainly, I think.
Yeah, I think it's crucial that salespeople understand that initial knee-jerk reaction is exactly that. When you call somebody and they say, oh, I'm not interested, it's what they say to every salesperson that calls. And I often equate it to, I don't know how it is where you live, but here, there are often clerks in department stores here that are waiting at the door, holding it open with a big smile. And as you're walking in, they'll say the same thing every time. Can I help you? And almost everybody says the exact same thing, which is, no, thanks, I'm just looking. And then as they walk away from the pesky salesperson, they turn back around and go, oh, wait a minute, where's the underwear? Where's the socks? Where's whatever they're looking for? But their knee-jerk reaction, without even thinking about it, is, get away from me, salesperson. And I believe it's important that we anticipate that that's what's probably going to happen to us too. So we have to understand it's just a knee-jerk reaction. And if we give them a reason, a proper rebuttal to turn it around. You probably know in psychology, it's called a pattern interrupt. We want to interrupt their automatic negative pattern. My experience when I cold called actively on a daily basis was typically I would get 2 objections and give 2 rebuttals, and then somebody would give me the appointment. It rarely was, oh yeah, let's just get together. So like you, I anticipate that everybody's going to have that initial reaction, but I understand it's just an initial reaction and it's not time to run yet.
No, it's intrinsic in them. It's been inherently inbuilt because of exactly the behavior that we've just described. And then if you interrupt that thinking, as you say, the pattern interrupt, they're going, okay, this is different. I'm not kind of used to this. And that makes a big difference. But at the end of the day, isn't it? It's all about, we're speaking to prospects. So it's got to be about them. It's not about us. If we make it about us, the salesperson, then we're doing it completely wrong. So it needs to be always about the prospect. If it doesn't work out, fine. But we've anticipated that it might not, but we've given them and shown them the respect they deserve initially.
Yes, and a VP of sales that I worked with at several different companies as he would move taught me this. At one point, I was doing a program, and he walked up to the front of the room while I'm training his team, and on the whiteboard he drew SW SW SWN exclamation point. SW, SW, SWN exclamation point. And he goes, Jeff, do you know what this means? And I'm like, I don't have a clue. And he said, it means some will, some won't, so what? Next. And I think that's the attitude you have to have when you're cold calling. Not everybody's going to accept your call. Not everybody's going to be pleasant, but some will. And we're kind of hunting for those, just like we are in sales. We're looking for the people who are going to buy.
Yeah.
What are some of the most common mistakes that people make when they're cold calling?
I think to not listen, firstly. I think that's a huge mistake. What they tend to do is to just go, oh, hi, Jeff, my name's Nick, and bang. All they do is they hit you with a pitch. It's full of features and benefits. We're brilliant. We've got a fantastic company. We work with these people. We do this, we do that. We can save you money. And they have no idea who Jeff is and what Jeff does and why Jeff is doing what Jeff does. So that's the biggest mistake, firstly, is just launching into this huge pitch. What they don't do is to understand that actually you're a very busy person. You have been doing what you've been doing because you've got that experience, and clearly you know what your business world is like. So to try and understand that, if they were to ask questions and be genuinely interested in your responses, that might then give them some insight into perhaps what they've got actually could work for you or not. But I think the biggest mistake is just launching into pitches. They don't allow for the prospect to talk. They don't ask them business-based questions. They're not interested. All they want to do is just push you into a corner and get you to sign something to say yes.
Yeah. Or the one that I hate is when somebody insults my intelligence. It does something so stupid. And I know you'll love this. I got a call, I think about 6 months ago. I answer the phone and she goes, hi, I'm calling from your copier company. Could you do me a favor? Just walk over to your machine and let me know which model you have. Now, I bought my copier at Staples, so I know it's not my copier company calling because it's not Staples calling me and they don't know anyways. So I said, well, wait a minute. If you're calling from my copier company, don't you know what you sold me? And she goes, I just don't have that record in front of me, sir. Can you just do me a favor and walk over? I said, sure. Let me just put you on hold. It's in the other room. I'll be right back. And 20 minutes later, I came back, and of course she was gone. You know, I could have driven to Staples and found it, but I mean, it's sitting right here. I hate when it's so blatantly stupid. Or the other one I despise is, we're calling businesses in your area to talk about blah, blah. Yeah. I'm like, oh, well, that makes me feel very special. Thanks for calling businesses in the area. Screw you, get off. How important is tone of voice? I mean, listening to you, I could listen to you all day because I'm kind of loud and brash, and you just have this calm tone. Is that a put on? Is that who you are?
No, this is me. This is genuinely me. But I would probably say that it's been arrived at through many years of speaking to people. The tonality is incredibly important, and for many, many reasons. This is a whole subject matter on its own, I think, and we could go on for hours, but very briefly, I think certain things are incredibly important. So first of all, the speed of delivery is a part of that. If you receive a call from a cold caller and they're talking very quickly, it's generally because they feel that what they're saying is awful and they just want to spew it out first and then be done with it.
Before you hang up on them.
Exactly.
If I talk really fast, I can get everything out before they hang up. Yep.
Precisely. Secondly, it doesn't show confidence. And I think if you speak nice, slow and low, it shows that you are confident about actually what you're saying. But then here comes the tonality. So the people that we speak to generally have their own way of speaking, and they will have a tonality themselves. And if we can match that, very much like we do face-to-face with body language, it's immediately going to help to make them feel a bit more comfortable. That's the psychology behind it. It actually does work, and that is something that's true. But if from our point of view, we're speaking to somebody that's in a high elevated position in terms of a company, and we've never spoken to them before, we deliver something with a nice low tone, that's slow like I'm speaking now, it's going to allow those people to understand that actually we are confident about what we're saying. So maybe we do know what we're saying. Maybe I should give that person some time and actually listen to what they have to say. And I think tonality can be incredibly important, certainly when it comes to aspects within the cold call itself, like asking very pointed questions or very sensitive questions. If you ask it in a respectful tone, can I say, it's going to make it a lot more credible. And that's another important part of the cold call overall, I think.
Yeah.
So tone is huge, Jeff.
Yep. Agreed. And I'm so glad that you mentioned speed. I'm a New Yorker. My brain works very fast anyways. I talk fast. I think fast. I do almost everything. I walk fast. In fact, when I'm live in front of an audience, I will often start out by saying, I'm from New York. I talk fast. I'm going to do my best to slow down, but you're going to just need to think. You're going to need to listen fast because I get excited.
Yeah.
But when I am on the phone, I am consciously slowing down because I know that the person may not be able to keep up with my rate of speed, but if I consciously, and it's not easy for me to, I really have to concentrate it. I do this. I don't know if I mentioned this when we first spoke, but I'm a stand-up comedian on the side. I do the same thing. I have to consciously make sure that I'm speaking at the rate that the audience can hear me, or the person on the other end of the phone can hear me, because they may not be able to keep up with me.
Exactly.
And I think you're right. Even if they can, I very well may come across as a smooth talking salesperson trying to get something over really quick. So it's crucial that we have that proper tone of voice and timing. How long should a cold call last? And is it better to make generic calls and make more of them, or to make less calls but personalize each one?
Okay, so less calls, personalized. Generic is not good. One shot doesn't, or one size doesn't fit all. So it's a very important point you raised there, Jeff, because although we might be speaking to the same ideal client profile, the same level of role within a business or an industry, say we're talking to VP of sales within the photocopying market. So we're speaking to the same role, the same level, and the same industry, but we're talking to individuals, and every single one of those individuals is completely different. So some will be from New York, some will be from a different part where they speak slower, some will be brash, some will be slow and low, all of these different things. So each call needs to be matched to that individual, irrespective of the fact that they're the same role, the same level, the same industry. So if we have that belief when we make that call, we can then match accordingly, say similar things, ask similar questions perhaps, but it needs to be all about that individual prospect. So no, let's not make these generic calls. Let's make them all more personalized to that individual to make it fit for them, so we can have better chance engaging them.
Good. So how much research do you do before each call, and how do you actually do that research?
Right. Okay. So I do no research at all whatsoever before I make a cold call. All of my cold calls are really cold calls. If I've spoken to somebody before, and then I've obviously had a look through their company profile, then all of that information, that's not to me a cold call. That's a warm call now.
Correct.
We're talking cold calls. So I won't do any research. The reason being is that I might spend 20 minutes doing all this research for a company and I can never get through to them. What's the point of that? I've wasted all that money, all that time.
Plus, you can make less calls.
Exactly.
So then if we're going to personalize the calls, how do we do that without research?
So I personalize them by matching their tone, matching their way of talking. Effectively, it's like the body language, but on the phone. Now, we don't have visual cues. We only have audible cues. So I'll pick up as quickly as I can the kind of responses that I get, which might be, hello, what do you want? I'm busy. So immediately I know somebody, I've caught them off the hop. They're not particularly interested in maybe taking a call. So I need to sort of go in there nice and gently. So if I say something nice and slowly and low, I will hopefully grab their attention for that 30 seconds, and then we'll start talking. And if they start to open up, warm up a little bit, then I'll match accordingly. That's the way I make it personal for them without the research.
Yeah, could not agree more. When I was cold calling actively, I did zero research other than, are you the right person to call? Which, like you, VP of sales, president, or CEO, those are the only people I ever called on at specific types of companies with specific size, so that I was hopefully speaking to a large sales team. But, I've sat and watched other people cold call, as a coach, actually sat next to them while they were doing it. I once sat next to a guy, he made a call. 20 minutes later, he picked up the phone and did it, because for that 20 minutes, he was researching his next call. And I was sitting next to him going, are you kidding me? Are you serious? Maybe you can make 10 or 12 calls today, but I can pound out 60 or 100. Who's going to get through to more people?
Sure.
So yeah, I'm with you. I think that you're 100% right, that if half the game is getting them to pick up the phone. And the other half is, what are we going to say? How are we going to engage them? And each of the people are different. You're absolutely right, but we will pick up on their tone because you're absolutely right. Some are going to sound incredibly busy. Me, I answer the phone the same way every time. Hi, this is Jeff. That's just the way I like to answer the phone. And so if you hear that, as opposed to, yeah, that's a different personalization.
Absolutely, of course it is.
Yeah. What about? Oh, I've got so many questions for you, and I see we're already running out of time. Here's one that I'd love to hear your opinion on.
Okay.
Predictive dialers. For anybody who's listening who doesn't know what I'm talking about, a predictive dialer is when you pick up the phone and you go, "Hi, this is Jeff," and there's that 2 or 3 second delay before somebody else comes on and go, "Hi, can I speak to Jeff?" I'll tell you, Nick, it annoys the crap out of me. If I've got to wait for you when you want some of my time, I'm not giving you any of my time. What's your feeling on? Obviously, it allows them to speak to more people. You could make 300 calls a day instead of 60 or 100. But what's your feeling on predictive dialers?
It's a simple response. I don't use them. I don't want to use them. I've got a chap at the moment that is in the UK that is somebody that I'm helping and coaching. He uses a predictive dialer, and effectively what he does is to have a certain amount of conversations that he wants to have with his ICP on behalf of his clients. So he needs to get through a number of dials per day, and it's a lot. But I've been listening to a lot of his calls this last week, and there's that horrible 3-second delay before somebody picks up. "Oh, hi, this is Nick. Is that Nick?" And it's like,
yeah, I just said it was Nick.
So from a prospect's point of view, and again, it's all about the prospects, from their point of view, before they've even heard who it is on the phone, they're now starting to feel annoyed. The wall's got up. "Oh, what's this? Is this a cold call? What's happening? Is this an AI bot calling me? What is this?" So I can understand the technology. I understand too, Jeff, though, that there are some technology is changing at a huge pace. This time next year, there's quite possibly going to be a predictive dialer that has eradicated that gap, that pause. If that's the case, they're going to make millions, absolutely, because that is a huge point. But it still abounds today, unfortunately, in dialers, predictive dialers, parallel dialers, etc., etc.
Yeah.
I don't use them. I don't like them for that one reason.
Yeah.
That pause.
Yeah, it's rude to me. Yeah,
it is.
You said it before. It's not about us. It's about them. And if you're using a predictive dialer, it's about you, not me. You don't mind wasting my 3 seconds while I've got to wait for you to come on. And I tell you,
how important does it make you feel as well? Oh, I'm just another number that you're calling that day.
For me, it's more of I answer the phone the same way. "Hi, this is Jeff," or "Good morning, this is Jeff," and then I'm so upset I'm choking. And then you come on and say, "Hi, can I speak to Jeff?" What about this one? Voicemail. Do you leave voicemail? And if so, do you expect to get a return call? And how do you do that?
So I don't leave voicemails, again, unless it's somebody I've already spoken to, and then it's more of a warm call. So we're not talking about warm calls. We're talking about cold calls. I don't leave voicemails. There are a number of faddy ways to that I see people say, "Do this, do that." So one of them is leave a voicemail and say, "Oh, hi, Jeff, this is Nick. And then end the call so it sounds like you've been cut off. Hopefully your curiosity is going to make you call back. So I wouldn't want to do that because that's not being honest or transparent.
Yeah.
So I don't leave voicemails. What does happen though, strangely enough, is that people will see my number has obviously called them. We haven't had that conversation. And on a daily basis, I get up to a dozen calls back to go, "Oh, hi, I had a missed call from you." At which point we'll then get into a conversation or we won't, just as a normal, me making the call, initiating the call. So I don't leave voicemails at that very start of the process.
Yeah, I love that you talked about the, my number is 608 and then you hang up. Because before I opened my own company, I worked for a sales training company, and the guy who ran it, who shall remain nameless, and he was an expert in the world of cold calling, an acknowledged world-class expert. That was one of the things we taught. I taught it to an audience one morning, got back to my office, and there was a message from somebody doing exactly that. And I actually did call him back, and he said, "Hey, I learned this from you this morning." And I'm like, "God damn, if it didn't work," but it made me feel bad. And I stopped teaching that because I don't want to do anything that's underhanded. Either you want to talk to me or you don't. If I've got to trick you into talking to me, something's wrong.
Absolutely, it is wrong. You should never trick anybody into. It should be on that. They should be happy and engaged, want to speak to you.
Yeah. Why do you say we should record our calls and listen back to them? And if we do, what should we be listening for?
Okay, so this is a very strong point of mine. I think it's an incredible learning opportunity first. Everybody, however, on the planet hates to listen to their own voice. And if they're ever on video, I'm not watching myself. I look awful. I'm embarrassed. I look fat. I look ugly. I look old. I look young. All of these things. If we keep doing it, though, it becomes easier. It's more normal. It's normality for us. So that's the first aspect of it. But the most important aspect of listening back to any calls that we make is that quite often when we're in the moment, in real time, having a conversation with somebody like you and I are doing now, we don't notice certain things because it's not a third person's perspective. If we step out of that picture and then listen to ourselves or look at ourselves, when we can act as that third person, we'll see things, we'll hear things that we missed when we were in that real call.
Yes.
And so listening is especially important because many callers, what they'll do is they'll ask, Jeff, I've got a question for you. Can you tell me about this? Whilst you're responding, I'm now thinking of the next question logically to ask you once you finish that response. So I've missed actually some of the stuff that's really important that you've just responded with. And a lot of salespeople do that. Now, if you pull yourself out of that picture and listen back to it as a third person's perspective, you're going to go, he just told me that he's got no budget for the rest of the year. I completely missed that because I was waiting to think about the next question I should ask him that was in the sequence logically. And so that's why you should listen back to your own calls, because first it's going to be really uncomfortable. After a while, it becomes normalized. It's okay. But then you start to hear things that you've missed. And it will show you a pattern of the kind of things that you keep doing again and again and again.
Yeah.
So that's then allowing you to break that pattern, improve, and become more able in your calling ability.
Yeah. That ex-boss, who shall still remain nameless, made me sit for the first month at night and listen to the calls I had made during the day. And as experienced as I was at that point, I still found talking too fast. I got to slow down because too many people are saying, what did you say? Well, that's on me, not them. Sure. And I also found that because I wasn't paying enough attention, they would give me objection A, but I'd be giving rebuttal B to some other objection because I wasn't listening carefully enough. Exactly what you said, because I'm thinking about what I'm going to say next, which is a mistake. So listening back, it is uncomfortable. And look, I'm a guy who loves the sound of his own voice, but not listening to me on cold calls.
Totally. And I think it's a natural trait to hate listening to yourself, to hate looking at yourself. But the more we do it, the more normalized it becomes. Look, you and I are men, so we have a shave most mornings and we'll look in the mirrors and we'll look at our ugly mugs. We get used to it after a while, of course. But for the ladies, it's the same thing if they're doing their hair. And you think but it's a normalized thing. So if you can do that, you can listen back to your own calls.
Are there any tools or software that you do recommend sellers use when cold calling that make them more efficient?
The data is always a big thing. So I do use a data platform. That's ever changing. I've used one for the last 12 months on contract. I'm not sure if I'm going to renew with the same because that technology keeps getting better and better. So if we go back 20 years, it used to be the case you'd pick up the yellow pages, you'd call a telephone number that was typically the office number, and you'd speak to a gatekeeper, and then, well, you'd have fun trying to get through to your prospect. Of course, nowadays it's different. So there are data platforms that allow you to understand that all the cell phone or the mobile numbers for your prospects are typically available. So you can speak directly to the person you want to. Some of those data platforms are better than others, and some of them are more expensive, et cetera, et cetera. But that really is the only, I suppose, tech that I use, apart from the fact that I'm overseas in different countries. I have a VoIP system through my laptop that allows me to make calls to generally my UK clients.
Yeah. So you're talking about things like Zoom Info or Lucia or Rocket Reach.
Exactly. So those, there's quite a few of them, and they keep growing I think, ever present nowadays, and getting better and better, which is only a good thing.
Yeah. And do you keep any metrics, or do you suggest salespeople keep any metrics? Like, I believe that salespeople should be tracking certain things. Like, I want to know how many times did you dial the phone to how many. I'm actually not interested in the number. I'm interested in the ratio. How many times did you dial the phone to how many times did you get through to the person you actually wanted to speak with? And when you speak to that person, how many appointments do you get? Are there anything other than that, or do you agree? Any metrics salespeople should be keeping track of when they're cold calling?
This is a huge subject, I think, as well. So I'm not going to go into that too deeply, but metrics, KPIs, certainly when somebody's entering into the sales industry, when they're a young professional, I think there's a lot to be said about getting it right at that level, because I think you could do things for the sake of doing things. So to answer your question more pointedly, the ones that interest me are really, if you're going to make an appointment and that's what you're doing, either for an AE or for your client or whatever it might be, the metric that I would understand to be the best one is, first of all, how many of those appointments are attended or sat? And secondly, out of those appointments that are attended or sat, how many of them then convert to revenue? So if I make 10 appointments, and if I have 3 that actually attend or sit, so I've wasted 7, and out of those 3, none of them turn to revenue. There's clearly an issue there, isn't there, in the way I'm setting appointments. If I make 10 appointments, 8 of them or 9 of them actually attend or sit, and then 3 of those go towards revenue and convert, that's a different story. It's the same 10, but a different way that they've actually been, I suppose, created. And so that's really the only metric that I teach to people is, are you actually doing this properly that's making you money? Is it working out? Or are you just making appointments for the sake of making appointments?
Got it. And looks like we only have time for one more question. I have about 40 more, so I'm going to give you this one because you brought it up. Gatekeepers. So there are less gatekeepers today because today most of it is automated, but there are still times when you get through to a live human being.
Oh, yes.
Who's been trained to, don't let anybody get through to me. I don't want to talk to salespeople, and it's our job to, how do we get through to that person? So any advice on how do we work with the gatekeeper to get through, or I hate to say, how do we get past them? Because
no, I agree with that. How do we get past them? How do we mitigate this kind of this potential issue? Okay, well, very briefly, I'll say there's 2 or 3 types of gatekeepers. There's the gatekeeper, if you will, or the receptionist that works at a huge corporate company. They're taking the calls, they're filtering them, getting rid of you. They're easy to get past because you just say, I want to speak to Jeff, and they'll put you through because they need to. They've got a huge volume coming in. That's fine.
I'm talking about the one that I'm a VP of sales and my assistant is taking my calls first.
So, right. So this is the difficulty. And I think sometimes if we try to consider that making or starting a relationship with them is going to work, I don't think it does. So on those occasions, what I have done and what I tend to teach is to say to these people, Jeff Goldberg, please. Who's calling?
Who's calling?
Tell him it's Nick. Okay, and what's it about?
There you go. I'm being the gatekeeper for you. What's this regarding?
So what they'll do is ask typically 3 questions. If you answer them, respond to them in a particularly assertive but not rude manner. Now they're thinking, I think this guy might already know Jeff. Dare I ask him a 4th question? What's it about? Or something else? Which company are you from? Actually, no, I'll just put him through. So they're assuming that we know each other, which of course we don't, and they put me through. Doesn't work all the time, but you have a better chance with it typically if you sound confident, assertive, and respectful.
Got it. Well, Nick, we actually are out of time, but before we go, I want to share my screen. I know you don't work with a website, but for those who are not watching, because this will get converted to a podcast and people will be listening, would you like to tell people how they can reach you if they're interested in finding out about working with you potentially?
Sure. Thank you, Jeff. Okay, so I'm all over LinkedIn, Nick Jeins, as you can see, Jeins, and my email there, njeins@gmail.com. Probably best though if you send me a connection request on LinkedIn, and then if there's anything that you would like to have a chat about, feel free. I'll be very happy to oblige.
And is there a phone number you'd like to give out?
There isn't one really that I give because I'm overseas. I tend to go from country to country. It can change. It's probably just easier through LinkedIn, but thanks for asking.
Got it. Well, Well, Nick Jeins, thank you so much for sharing your brilliance so generously with us today. You and I believe that cold calling still works. And if you
Absolutely.
listen today and you don't think so, I'd say give it a try. Listen to some of the things that Nick said, and you just might find that you can fill up your calendar with appointments and start making more money. And I'll end as I always do, Nick. Please remember, guys, that sales is a game of making things happen. So get out there and make sales happen. Have a great weekend, everybody. Have a great weekend, Nick. Thanks again.
Thanks, Jeff.